Hello, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm finally answering the question, how many queens does it take to beat Stockfish? The last time I did this challenge, I accidentally played the Komodo engine, which is the engine chess.com actually offers users to play against. After a lot of research and YouTube tutorials, I figured out how to use a different software to play against Stockfish, and that's why the board is different. I'll play the first game even, with high hopes of winning, and each game I'll replace one pawn with a queen. Let's get started with d4. I've set the engine to a depth of 25, which to my understanding is deep enough to get steamrolled by Stockfish. I'll continue with my regular London, bishop to f4. Bishop to f5, so far we have a perfectly symmetrical game, which is fine by me. It's a little more boring, but it's fine to play. We'll play e3. Against an engine, I'd rather go boring than crazy lines anyways, so we get e6, keeping the symmetry, and we'll develop bishop to d3, offering our first trade of the game. He does accept, and we'll recapture with the queen. Sometimes I like to recapture with the pawn, just to look for e4 and kind of complicated ideas, but since I'm playing against an engine who can definitely think many tens of millions of positions deeper than I can, I'll recapture with the queen and keep things simple. We get knight to f6, which is normal development, so I'll continue with my own normal development, knight to f3. We get pawn to c5, and anytime I see this move, I always respond with c3 to strengthen up my center, so c3. We get pawn captures, and here I have the option to either capture with my c-pawn and maintain the symmetry, or capture with my e-pawn and not maintain the symmetry. And I'd like to capture with my e-pawn, because sometimes there's some cool ideas of kingside attacks later in the game. So I'll capture with my e-pawn. We get bishop to e7, a pretty reserved move, and I'll go ahead and castle. Stockfish castles right back, and I'll just finish my development with knight b to d2. Oh, okay, we get knight to h5. Our first, let's say, interesting move of the game. I was kind of expecting knight to c6 or knight to d7, which would be like a normal developing move looking for a quiet game, but instead we get knight to h5. I'll just play this the normal way. I'll just play bishop back to g3, and if he takes, then I'll just recapture, and it should still be a pretty even game. So I'll play bishop g3. Stockfish does take on g3. I actually also have the option to recapture with my f-pawn, which is super interesting because it opens up a line for my rook. But I'll humble myself. I'll play this normal because I am playing against Stockfish. I'll recapture with my h-pawn instead. Holy moly. Okay, we get h5 on the board, which is like extremely aggressive considering he hasn't even completed his development yet. So I'm not sure what the idea is with h5. I don't know if the engine wants a kingside attack or if it's avoiding something, if it thinks I'm going to play a knight e5, knight g4 or some weird line like that. I don't think I'm supposed to be afraid of h4 because if I capture and engine recaptures, we just simplify. And I can even offer a queen trade at the end of that line. So I'm not afraid of that. I'll just bring my rook towards the center. That's what I would normally play, so I'll do it here, rook to e1. We do get knight to c6 finally, about 2 or 3 moves later than expected, but it's there, and I'll play knight to e5 to offer that trade in the center. Okay, engine declines, but it does play rook to c8. I'm going to play queen to f3 because I have to punish this. This is a very strange move. It creates a weakness as far as I can tell, with no backing. If at least the king were like on g7 and rook to h8 were coming next, I would understand the move. But h5 all by itself seems to be just a random weak move. So I'm going to play queen to f3 and try to punish that. Engine captures on e5 and I'll recapture with the rook, activating another one of my pieces. And we get g6, right, defending the h5 pawn, and possibly with ideas of f6, g7 with the bishop, so that engine can improve its bishop position and not leave these squares weak. I'd like to kind of force the matter. I'm kind of interested in playing g4 here and seeing if I can break down his pawn structure. So I'm going to play that. I'm going to play g4, put some pressure on h5, and I'm going to make that my point of interest for the next couple of moves. We get bishop to d6 by engine, threatening my e5 rook. I wish I could articulate how tempting it is to just capture this pawn. Allow engine to take my rook, I recapture. Should engine recapture, I activate my queen. And I know that against engine, I would probably lose that. But against a human player, I might not think twice about that. I might play knight to f3, g3, king g2, rook h1, and just look for any mating ideas that I can find. But I am playing against Engine, which I think I need to be a little more respectful. If I'm disrespectful, I can suddenly get, terminated in a couple of moves here. I need to be conscientious about what moves I decide to actually take risks on. Because I'll tell you what doesn't look attractive right now is rook to e5 and h4. It closes up my kingside attack. It leaves basically my dark squares extremely vulnerable. And I'm not interested in that position against Engine. Because I can already see it happening. Rook to e3, h4, king g7 happens, rook h8 happens, h3 happens. If I ignore it, h2 happens. And suddenly I'm scrambling for moves, which is not ideal, obviously. And I don't see any way to thwart that plan or counterattack it at all. So I think I'm going to play it. Against my better judgment, I'm going to capture on h5. Okay, the bishop takes. I won't even think about it. I'll recapture. And queen to g5. Yeah, there it is. One move later, I'm getting punished. I have to take care of this pawn, so I'm going to capture on g6. Although I don't really want to because it opens up the rook. Yeah, I don't have a choice, though. I'm going to take king to g7. What? What is king to g7 for? Also, I just realized my knight is under attack. I have no idea why Engine didn't just capture my knight, now that I think about it. Interesting. I'm going to move my knight out of the way. Okay, finally we get the recapture on g6. Maybe I can play queen to h3. If queen takes e5, knight d4, maybe I can try to put some pressure on e6. We'll try that, queen to h3. We get queen takes e5, and we'll play knight d4, centralizing my knight, trying to put pressure on e6. Okay, rook c to e8 obviously just defends that, and I can already feel that I'm out of moves. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to play here. My knight feels like it's optimally placed. My queen feels like it's well placed, covering this and hitting e6. And the question is, how would I improve my rook? I could actually play f4 here. And I like the idea of knight to f3, knight to e5. And he can't, an Engine can't actually capture, I don't think, because I can recapture with my rook, queen takes, and then knight e6. So I'm going to play that. I'm going to play f4, try to boot the queen and maybe create an outpost for my knight on e5. Okay, we get queen to e4, and the original point stands. Engine can't capture on f4 because of that fork. But on the other hand, actually this outpost isn't anything to me because as soon as I play knight to f3, f4 falls anyways. What I could play here is queen to g3, with the idea that maybe I can play rook to e1. If takes, I still have that knight to e6 move. If takes, I'd have to take with my queen first, and then after recapture, I have knight to e6, I think. We'll give that a try, because I just want to improve the position of my pieces, so I'll try queen g3. Okay, we get rook to f6. We'll continue with rook to e1. Oh, that obviously means I miscalculated something. Queen takes f4. I can't take right now, because Engine will just recapture. If I try to take the queen, then takes on e1 with check, and then I drop this queen anyways. So I have to capture his queen first. Oh, of course. If I play check, it doesn't matter to him. He's going to move out of the way. And when I capture this rook, he's going to capture my own rook. Okay, at least I pick up a pawn in that process, so I don't really have a choice anyways. We'll play check. Oh, I like that it's purple. It almost looks like my icon there for a second. I'll take on f4. Check, we'll move king to f2. I will say this is very nostalgic because I grew up on ChessBase, and seeing this kind of old style layout is very, very nostalgic. I'll play knight d3, trying to defend this pawn. We get king to g5, and this is crushing. I have no mobility for any of my pieces. I'll just blitz out a couple of moves here and try to hold on, but he's going to slowly walk down my pawn. So I'll play like a3, so I only have one pawn to worry about. King h4, slowly walks forward. I'll play, I don't even know, king f3. Rook f1 check, I'll cover with my knight. I mean, I would love for him to play rook b1 again, so I can play knight d3, and maybe we can do a little bit of repetition. But instead he plays g5, looking for g4, I presume. So I'll play g4 myself. He could just sacrifice his rook here. If Engine sacks, then it's over for me. Okay, instead we get b6. I'll move my king out of the way. Because I also have the issue that if rook back to b1, I have to defend it. So the king needs to be here to protect this pawn. So I'm basically almost in zugzwang. I really don't have that many options. I'll play king to e3. Why not? Yeah, yeah, don't sacrifice your rook and finish this off elegantly. No, play king to g3 and complicate my life even more. Okay, I'll forfeit that pawn, knight to d3. Okay, and I won't spend too much time explaining this endgame because it's already lost. I'll just play out the moves and see how Stockfish puts me in the ground. All right, to the complete and utter shock of nobody, we got destroyed by Stockfish in game 1. We did last 48 moves, and I would argue it wasn't a terrible game, but we definitely got finessed in trying to create our own kingside attack. He definitely turned that around on its head and gave us a good run for our money on the kingside. So we'll go ahead and try that again, this time with an extra queen. All right, we've returned with an extra queen and a lot more confidence because of it. We'll start with d4 just like last time. We're met with knight to f6, and we'll play bishop g5 looking for a trade right away. If I can trade off pieces, I can destroy. I can win this game, basically for certain. Okay, we're met with pawn to c5. We'll go ahead and trade, right? Trades are good. Trades are good. If I can have that extra queen be the last piece left over after all of these trades, then I'm in mint condition. All right, pawn takes f6. We should probably address this pawn now. I'm not going to capture because I don't want to complicate my position unnecessarily. Instead, I'll play pawn to e3, just supporting that central pawn. Okay, Stockfish captures. We'll recapture with our own pawn. And we're met with queen to b6, hitting the b2 pawn right away, which is actually very annoying. Ouch. Right, because my bishop on c1 is missing, so there's nobody to do that job. I'll push b3 to protect my pawn. It's my only option, really. I could play queen to c1, but then I would have lost the d4 pawn. And we're met with pawn to d6. So far, this looks like a pretty normal game, except for the fact that this h2 pawn is actually a queen. So I'll continue with regular development, knight to f3. And we're met with bishop to g4. I'll go ahead and block the pin with my other bishop. And we get pawn to d5. It's really incredible to watch the engine slowly restrict your options. Even though it's down a full queen, it still finds those tricky ways to restrict the moves that you can actually make. I'll go ahead and castle so it's not an issue later. And we're met with knight to c6, putting some pressure on this d4 pawn with the queen and the knight. I've just realized that I've been treating this queen like a magic gift, but maybe I should actually be developing it. Maybe I should develop it to f4, for example, putting some pressure on the g4 bishop. I'll play that. Maybe I should develop my knight first. I do drop this pawn, but then again, trades are so good for me that it might not matter. So we'll play that, knight to d2. We're met with long castles, which is ridiculous. I'm sorry, that is a engine move 100%. Down a queen, opposite side castling, basically inviting an attack to happen. I'm going to play c4. I just want to blast open that position and basically punish him for being down a queen and daring to castle opposite side of me. Oh, all right, we get queen to c7. I will take this moment to make a point about the difference between this game and the last game that I played. I believe when I played against Komodo, he didn't trade queens until the very, very end. I think it was the second to last major/minor piece that got traded off. And it's interesting here that Stockfish has decided on move 11 to offer a queen trade, which I will blindly accept. That is not an issue for me whatsoever. I'll accept the queen trade. Obviously, engine will recapture. Yep, engine will recapture. And now we just simplify this game. We're up a full clean queen, so we just need to simplify this position. I'll start by bringing my rook to the middle with rook to c1 on the same file as the king now. We get bishop to h6, pinning this knight, which is like of no concern whatsoever. So I will capture here on d5. And I'd kind of like to play bishop to b5 and start looking for even more trades if possible. All right, we get rook takes d5. I can't play b5 obviously right now because the rook covers that square. But what I can play is bishop c4. Bishop c4 hits the rook. I guess the rook could capture on d4. If I take, the bishop takes, check. I take with my rook. That seems fine to me, so I'll play bishop c4. All right, we do get rook takes d4, and let me just make sure that my math is right here. Takes, bishop takes, we play check, king moves, we recapture. Knight is protected by this rook. That's still completely winning. So I'll go ahead and take on d4. All right, bishop takes as expected. We'll give that intermediate check. We get king back to b8. And maybe I should actually capture with this rook just to unpin my knight in the process. Yeah, I quite like that idea. So we'll take on d1 with the other rook instead. So we unpin this knight. And we get knight to e5. Okay. Interesting. It hits the bishop, quote unquote, but again, I'm not afraid of trades. In fact, I invite them. Knight to f3 is interesting, but I wouldn't want him to take, and then rook g8 check. King h1. Is there actually a follow-up to that, or am I just being a scaredy cat because this is an engine? So I'll play knight to f3 and offer that trade. Knight takes. We're forced to recapture. And we get pawn to a6, which actually makes a lot of sense. If he's going to bring the rook out at some point, it'd probably be better not to have me controlling c7 with ideas of rook to d8 checkmate. Question is, where do I move this knight to? I'm going to move it to c3 because I think it makes the most sense to either reroute it to d5, hitting these two pawns, or reroute it to e4 as an emergency backup and come back to g3. So I'll play knight to c3. We're met with rook to c8, which does pin the bishop, so I'm assuming Engine is looking to play b5 and strike down one of my pieces. So I'll go ahead and move it out of the way. I guess knight to d5 is probably the best spot. Let's see, knight to d5, this check is still available, king h1, rook g5. No, I'm going to play knight to e4 instead, so I have knight to g3 just in case. All right, we get pawn to f5, which actually completely demolishes the whole idea, right? If knight to g3, then rook to g8, and he's looking for this pin. That's unfortunate. I guess I could just take, rook here, check. There's counterattacking ideas. It's not like it's losing or anything, but it's frustrating. I'll still play it anyways because that was the idea, and I think it simplifies my problems substantially. We get pawn to e6, which is a really interesting way of limiting the number of options I have for my bishop. I can't go to b5, d5, e4 anymore. Objectively, my bishop only has these squares to move on right now, which is kind of interesting. I could play a4 to cement my bishop, or I could play rook to d7 and look for counterplay. I'm going to play a4 and cement my bishop. If I don't need to create a line for him, I won't. Okay, we're met with rook to g8, which does threaten f4. And honestly, I'm willing to lose that knight. That's not an issue for me. I'll play rook d7. I need to start coming up with my own plans. If I just react to everything Engine does, eventually I'll get finessed. All right, there it is, f4. I'll play king to g2. F takes. We'll recapture with our own pawn. And we're met with bishop to f4, which looks like I should just play g4 maybe. This is really annoying, actually. This is super annoying. g4, h5 might be even worse. Let me see. Takes, 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 king f3. No, it might not be that bad, actually. So we'll play that. We'll play g4. Okay, we're met with rook to f8, which is completely different, but okay, that works. Let's see. How do we actually start breaking through in this position? I like rook to d1 to see if I can find a rook trade. Because that's what I really need. If I can just get his pieces off the board, I'll get a lot of headaches out of my way. So I'll play rook to d1 instead. We're met with bishop to e3, which is unfortunately completely losing. I just know myself well enough. If I can get this rook trade, it's all over for the Engine. Engine has no choice but to capture here, which we do get. Rook takes d8. I'll recapture with check. And I have to be careful not to fall for anything silly, but this should be pretty straightforward, right? King to a7, in my opinion, not even the best move, although I guess I have no right to comment on Stockfish, right? As a human, I would probably have played king to c7, so I at least get out of the way of rook to d7 and counterattack the rook. But since he didn't play that, I'll play rook to d7, hitting both of these pawns, and just looking to pick them off one by one. We get f6. I could take e6, actually, or I could take on h7. I like e6 better. I'm going to capture on e6. Maybe I can play bishop to d5 after. We get king to b6, and that looks like it opens the hatch for bishop to d5 because this pawn can't even move anymore. So I'll play bishop d5. We're met with, okay, a Stockfish down to his last piece counterattacking. King to c5 hits the bishop. I'll play bishop to e4. I'm still looking at both of these pawns. One of them has to go on the next turn. b5, okay, maybe not on the next turn. We'll take with a fair trade, and then we'll pick up h7. King takes b5, right? And we'll go ahead and pick up this h7 pawn. King comes down to b4, and obviously this pawn is not for free, so I'll give check to just squash that idea altogether. Okay, king to a3. Interesting. I'd like to play here maybe king to g3 so I can look for f4, g5 maybe. Although that would still lose the pawn. Interesting. I can't move this pawn because if I put it on a dark square, it's as good as gone. Right, bishop d2 right away picks up the pawn. I guess I could play, I don't know, I'll go with king g3. It looks fine to me. We'll play king g3 and see what we're met with at least. Okay, we get king to b2, which I'm not even going to try to understand that. I'll just play f4. And then maybe I can play king to f3. All right, bishop to d2. I'm assuming these are just kind of waiting moves that hold on to the position, or at least in the engine's mind, it's basically the same position. But anyways, the idea of king f3 was to remove the bishop, so maybe I could play rook b6. But it looks like engine did that all by itself, so I'll play rook to b6 now, forking both of these pawns. We're met with bishop to e1 check. Fighting tooth and nail, we'll play king to f3. We're met with bishop to h4, so he elects to hold on to this pawn, which makes sense, because if I pick up a6, b3 goes out the roof. But it should still be completely winning, so I'll take a6. Engine plays king to c3, question mark, question mark. Okay, that's not going to cut it. I'm going to play rook to b6 and just push my pawn and make him sacrifice his bishop for it. We get king to b2, I'll push. King to a3, I push again. Try to stop me, see what happens. Pawn to f5. Free pawn, yay, free pawn. King to b4. I don't even have to push this pawn anymore. I can push this pawn now. I'll play g5. All right, we got bishop to e1. We'll keep pushing. Bishop to c3 cuts off the pawn, effectively. We'll play b7 to force the issue. We get bishop to a1, and now we'll just go ahead and push the pawn. He'll probably take it, we'll recapture, and then we'll just promote the f-pawn. Right, takes, we recapture. King takes on b5. I'll go ahead and cut off the king. And this is just a simple conversion. So I'll plant this rook on c8, move my bishop to e6, and then just push, 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 push. So I'll go ahead and speed through this for us. All right, we've promoted to a queen. We'll go ahead and give that check on b4. King shuffles over to a7. We'll give rook c7 check. King moves to a6, and beautifully we finish off with a checkmate with all of our pieces. Bishop to c4 is checkmate. All right, we finally actually did it. It turns out it takes me one extra queen to beat Stockfish. If you guys did enjoy this video or have other suggestions for similar videos, please like and subscribe and leave them down in the comments below. I will see you guys in the next video.